Welcome to part 2 of our 5-part series with Don Roach, who served in the United States Marine Corps. The Veterans Archives, where your story matters. We are dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes for future generations.
They were capable of either single or full automatic fire. They had a tremendous recoil. And so we did that for a week. Then the second week we actually fired on the range.
Oh.
And we fired at 100, 300, and 500 meters. That's more than 500 yards, more than 5 football fields.
Yeah, that's...
I got to be real good at that. And we're using little peep sights on the M14s. We're just looking through a little window to aim the weapon. And I, of course, was wearing glasses in those days. I wore a good pair of glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent the whole week. My scores improved as I went through the week. I was doing a little better the 100 meters we had to do it standing up. It was all I could do to hold the weapon up long enough to shoot it, squeeze a round off before the thing had me half bent over. There was no way my old worn out back at 19, or at 18, I couldn't even hold this thing up long.
Uh-huh.
And so we'd have to fire 10 rounds before we could move up to the 200 meter range. So at 200, you were usually, I think you were sitting down. At the 500 meter range, you were laying down, you're in prone. So that's really why my scores improved, is I didn't have to hold the weapon up. I could use the ground to prop it up. And so finally we get to the end of the second week, and now we're on qualification day, qual day. And the DIs are all there, the platoon commander is there, he's a staff sergeant, and the pressure's on because the platoon commander and the DIs have a bet, Marine Corps,
Of course.
with other competing platoons as to what group is going to get the highest scores.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, every group expects their guys to get the highest scores. Some of them have been extra nice, a little not so much push-up time as, bet is not exactly right, but that'll pass,
Yeah, so they have the strength to shoot, right?
Yeah, they were trying to make it easier for us.
Yeah.
So we get out on the range, and our platoon is split in half. One half was actually shooting.
Mm-hmm.
The other half was on the targets, raising them and lowering them. That's called pulling butts, because they're in the butts or in the depressions.
Yeah.
With the gears that hoist and lower the targets. And of course, what they do is when there's a bullet hole in the target, they mark it. If it's in a white area, they put a black dot in it. If it's in a black area, they put a white dot right in the middle.
Yeah.
So that the shooters and the scorers can see it. So after every time you fire, somebody marks the target. Of course, then you've got guys that don't even hit the target.
Right.
In that case, they wave the red flag, which is called Maggie's drawers. And if one of those comes up, you're going to have a bad day with a DI after that.
Yeah.
A really bad day. And because how dare you waste Marine ammunition? It costs a bundle,
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's $1 a shot, how terrible. Many guys would have wanted to hand them $1, Like, give me another one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anyway, on qualification day, I was the first guy in my platoon to shoot expert.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 500 meter range, I was firing while the targets were in motion. The fresh target would be on its way up, and by the time it got up to the stop, my bullet was already hitting it, and it was going back down, and the other one was coming up. So my target Well, the other targets, you'd see them go up, stay a moment, and then go back down slowly, and then another one, and they'd stay a moment or two, and well, my targets were going.
Because you were just...
And I'm banging away. I mean, I'm single fire, but my platoon commander comes running up behind me, starts yelling, slow down, slow down. Well, the primary marksmanship instructor, our PMI, starts yelling at him, leave him alone. He's scoring bullseyes. Like, what's the matter with you? Let him do it his way, you know.
Right,
So
it's
I'm
working.
banging, and I got about 10 of them out of 10. So that pushed me into expert range on the scorecard. And the other half of the platoon there were 9 more experts. Some as good as I was, some were better. But the guys that could hold the weapon up, standing up, were a lot better.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
I thought from then on I'm going to have to find a tree to lean on with one of these damn cannons here. But I figured, well, if I ever get near the enemy, I'm going to let them run 500 yards away or 500 meters, and I'll ding them there.
That's right.
Because that's where I can get them.
You have plenty of time to lay down and shoot them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I figured I had no worries. And of course, when we got to Vietnam, they issued M16s. I got even better.
Well, because those are lightweight. Those are
Yeah.
plastic, basically.
And they didn't have any recoil
Yeah.
to speak of.
Yeah.
So
What was it like? What was it like first landing in Vietnam? Like when you first got there, what were your thoughts? What was that like for you?
I went over on Continental Airlines. There were 300 of us. We first flew from El Toro Air Base to Hawaii. Landed at Honolulu International Airport. We got there at about 2 or 3 in the morning. Everything's pitch black. The pilot actually made a tour around the islands so we could see them, and there was still traffic running on the highways,
Yeah.
and it looked like a string of white pearls on black velvet. It was beautiful, and I've never forgotten that sight. And then we landed, and we had about a 30-minute break while I refueled the airplane to go on to Okinawa, where we were going to disembark.
Right.
So we got off the airplane in Honolulu. I was one of the first, well, first off, we're landing in Honolulu. There's this really cute, short-haired brunette stewardess that a Marine across the aisle from me has been hassling the entire flight, trying to get something going.
Right.
So they've announced we're going to land in Honolulu. She comes down the aisle, bends over like she's going to give him a big hug, backs up and sits in my lap. That's where she was when we landed.
Oh.
So I got all the eyes of the other Marines staring at me like, what is that skinny, silly-looking guy with glasses doing? And of course, the guy across the aisle was furious.
Oh, yeah.
He felt like he'd been stabbed in the back, and he wanted to kill me. And I could just see him staring the daggers at me. And I thought, screw you. I'm enjoying this too much to complain.
Yeah.
Anyway, she was very nice, and she left. I never got her name. So we get off the airplane in Honolulu. The airport had a sunken section in the center, just like my high school had.
Yeah.
And down there were palm trees with Christmas lights in them, because this is early December. 300 Marines are looking over the edge, and I yelled, "Look at the Christmas trees." 300 Marines said, "Where?" Boy, I knew I was in deep sneakers.
Yeah.
These guys had no imagination whatsoever. And I thought, you know what? This could work in my favor. I can outthink any one of these guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got back on the airplane. We landed in Okinawa. And turns out we're going to Camp Smedley Butler, which is on top of a mountain. The only way up is to get in an Okinawan taxi cab. So 5 of us jam into this Toyota Corolla, which I've never been in my life because they're such tiny cars.
Right.
And 5 of us are going up this mountain, around. We're going around the island in circles, going up the mountain. And a bus coming the other way, and my driver playing chicken.
Oh no.
The last second, my driver dodges out of the way, and the bus gets to hug the inner side part of the road with the wall, the mountain. We're in the left lane going up in the wrong lane,
Yeah.
and we're heading over the edge like, ah! He gave us a business card and says, hey, if you ever, you need a ride to come to the city, call me. I thought, no way. I'm not going anywhere.
Tear up that card and throw it away.
This is my new home. So we get to Camp Smedley Butler. And I'm expecting, well, we're going to be here 3 or 4 days because they're still moving things around in Vietnam to get ready for us. So I'm thinking, wouldn't it be smart of the Marine Corps to give us a tour? Okinawa's kind of a special place in Marine Corps history.
Yeah.
We've got the raising of the flag as a monument, well, it wasn't then, but we knew they were going to build one.
Right.
And it's pictured on everything, And they never gave us a tour. They didn't tell us anything. They did let us go to an EM club, which was in a cavern cut into the side of the mountain. The Japanese hand-formed a cavern to store supplies during World War II. And of course, the Marines made an EM club out of it.
That makes sense.
You had to go down a series of steps, but they were you could put 10 across on there easily.
Yeah.
Long series of stone steps, and then you were inside the gathering area, tables and chairs. Well, I had made a friend, and we sometimes practiced speaking German to each other. I had 4 years of German in high school, and it was a novelty language that I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Because I always wondered when I was watching those war movies, what do those Germans actually sing?
Right.
It turned out they weren't saying much of anything. They're just given some words and told to say that, And they didn't always pronounce those right.
But it sounded good if you didn't know German.
Yeah, one guy was yelling in a war situation, and when I was able to translate it was, I've got the wrong button on my uniform, it was something stupid like that, Well, this is garbage. Hokey pokey. So, and I had a knack, I had 2 German teachers, both spoke different dialects.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had one teacher my first year, a different teacher the second year, and then they alternated the 3rd and 4th years. And in my 4th year, the 2 teachers were talking to each other about different students. And the one had mentioned something, the other one about, how is he in your class? Because he speaks my dialect fluently. He says, he doesn't speak your dialect. He speaks my dialect fluently. So they got me in there.
Mm-hmm.
They started asking me questions, and I answered each of them individually. And they asked, do you even know you're doing that? And I said, doing what? Answering in different dialects. And it turned out I didn't.
Yeah,
I just knew what the teacher was saying and gave it back to me.
Yeah.
So
you have this buddy that you guys are talking German.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're down in the EM club, and of course something goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 2 idiots starting trouble. They're grabbing at each other, and their buddies are grabbing at each other, and I can see a riot starting real quick.
Yeah.
So I say to my buddy in German, I said, time for us to go. So we're marching up the steps as the MPs come roaring in. We don't have any chevrons or anything on our uniforms. We're just wearing plain utility tops and bottoms, And we're speaking a language they don't understand.
Right.
So they assume we're foreigners. So they went right by us like we weren't even there. And we laughed all the way out. And That's when I finally realized misdirection can work in your favor.
Uh-huh.
Smoke and mirrors. Just like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's the quickest way to distract somebody? Tell them you're going to next Greenland or Canada. Start trouble.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
what he's really doing, he doesn't want us to know. So, anyway, I later on, you know, buddies showed up and turned out the MPs had yelled at a bunch of people and hauled a couple idiots away to the brig for a night, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were too gentle about it.
Right.
MPs weren't known for being gentle.
No. And you know, it's funny. I talked to a lot of guys from the Vietnam era, and they don't have a very high opinion of the military police from that time frame. I think because of a lot of the interactions.
Yeah, while we were in Vietnam, we were warned not to be caught alone
Uh-huh.
if we were going through a place like Da Nang.
Right.
So you go in pairs or bigger. So because if you're a single Marine, you might get rolled, have your wallet stolen. And it might not be Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
It could be MPs. So there were members of that corps that were less than scrupulous.
Right.
And a single Marine was considered vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. So how long were you on Okinawa for?
4.5 days.
Okay. Not that long then.
No.
And then you made the jump over to
Yeah,
Vietnam.
they had us moving wall lockers from one Quonset hut to another.
Uh-huh.
The next group moved them back.
Got to keep Marines busy.
That was their attitude.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, I was much happier doing that than anything else I could think of.
Yeah.
Moving wall lockers is not that bad a job. Just takes time,
That's right.
especially when you're dragging your feet.
Yeah.
So, so we get to Vietnam. We landed in Da Nang, and we land at night. The airplane's dark until it needs to see the runway, puts its runway lights on,
Mm-hmm.
or its landing lights on. Once it's landed, the lights go off
Right.
because anything moving around lit up like an airliner is a target. So we sneak into Da Nang, and I'm one of the Marines assigned to help unload the sea bags from the hold of the airplane. Not a terrible job.
No.
I can do that. You know, just didn't have to haul them far, just had to throw them on the truck. So we did that. And I'm looking around the airport the whole time. And like I said, I see a little better in the dark, so I can kind of see shadows of things that are maybe invisible to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I see one interesting shadow. In between a couple of hangars, there's a big long truck that has something on the back under a tarp. And it looks like a DSRV, submarine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an aviation nut, but I'm also a submarine nut.
Right.
Remember the one I diagrammed in 3rd grade?
Yeah. Goes back to the book that you read, and
I know all the World War II subs. I know all the orders for commanding a dive, you know, rig out the bow planes and this and that. And you name it, I can do it. So, you know, one of my favorite sayings is, you know, blow negative, blow safety, you know.
yeah.
So anyway, I saw the thing, and I thought, boy, if I get a chance, I'm going to go over there and look at that thing. Well, the next, we ride inside the trucks with the sea bags.
Mm-hmm.
We're driving along about 30, 40 miles an hour, and I start hearing incoming, whoomp, 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 and it's catching up to the truck. So I'm yelling incoming, and I'm diving over the top of the sea bags and everybody else, heading for the exit at 40 miles an hour. three guys pile on top of me to pin me down, keep me from killing myself.
Right.
The mortar rounds I heard were the next truck backfired.
No, definitely not incoming.
So they saved my life. First time my buddies saved my life. The next morning, we were free to move around or do whatever we want after breakfast. They didn't have anything for us to do. So I wandered back up to that hangar area, and I'm going between the hangars to look at the submarine.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear, "What are you doing over there?" Well, some staff sergeant, staff sergeant to me is like God because he's got so many ranks above me. It's pathetic.
Yeah, you're pretty fresh, right, from boot camp.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll answer yes, sir, to anybody, And I explained to him, I said, well, I was unloading the airplane the other night, and I noticed this submarine. I wanted to take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And he doubles over laughing. Finally, he says, "You idiot, that's not a submarine, that's a 10.5 diesel generator." Well, I had no interest in generators, so I went back to where I belonged and stayed there until they hauled us off to 7th Marine Regiment. At 7th Marine Regiment, I got the detail to burn shitters. That was a job many of us learned to hate real quick.
Well, and I'll have you know, it hasn't changed.
So here I am hauling these big oil drums out full of kerosene and shit,
Mm-hmm.
taking them over to a pit, dumping them in, then lighting the container to burn out the residue, putting them back under the chairs and the heads on the made out of wood. And as I was doing that, I spotted the live grenade in the muck.
Oh.
Must have fallen off somebody's belt while they were taking a shit. So I went over and get the corporal of the guard on duty and drag him over to show him a live grenade. He says, "I'll have somebody take care of that." So at least I didn't have to do it.
Right. You've already got a crappy enough job,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
No pun intended.
No point in dying that shit. So I had a big respect for explosives. I paid attention. I was wide awake at every class we had on explosives.
Mm-hmm.
I followed the instructor's hands and feet and studied everything he had to say about whatever we were learning about. And we learned a lot about things. Fortunately, that was the only time I had to do that. I was never around a fixed base long enough to ever get that duty again.
Now, I don't know if we talked, was you were infantry?
I was a rifleman.
Okay. I mean, everybody in the Marine Corps is infantry first and then whatever second, right?
Primary MOS is 0311, which is rifleman.
Okay.
In Vietnam, we were called grunts because we did the grunt work. And I didn't care what they called it. As far as I was concerned, I was just a Marine doing my job.
Yeah.
And as part of my job, I was sent from 7th Marines to 1st Marine Division, which was the home of 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, 2-7, where they were going to assign me to a rifle company. So that I was there with two other guys. We were in the mix waiting for the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
The other two guys were Lewis and Clark. So we became Lewis and Clark and Roach.
Okay.
And we maneuvered all around the 1st Marine Division, given odd jobs to do this or do that, or the three of us.
Yeah.
But it was always Lewis, Clark, and Roach. We thought that was funny.
That is, well, Lewis and Clark, I mean, that's funny in itself.
And the other two guys were black.
Uh-huh.
I didn't care one way or another. They accepted me. And that's one thing I never understood, the problem of racial separation. I never saw other people as different. And most of them were smarter than I was, so I was always impressed. There were a few that weren't, but the people of other races usually had to try harder and do more, and of course they were physically stronger because they had to do work and things, and they loved to play sports. And that kind of, which of course meant they could see things
Right.
that I couldn't. So I was the guy that was always catching up. And the only thing I was good at was I could fire a rifle and hit a target every time. If I could see it, I could hit it.
That's important.
Over there it was.
Yes, absolutely.
And they kind of considered me fearless because I was always walking point. Well, I chose point because I wanted to know where I was going and what was out there. And I didn't want to have to hear it secondhand from some idiot.
Right.
And believe me, there are a lot of idiots running around the Marine Corps and other places.
Yeah.
Well, I got to my rifle company, hotel company. That's where I was throughout the war. Third platoon, 3rd squad. And when I arrived at the company, of course, I had to turn my paperwork in, and the man you see is the executive officer. So the first thing I did was meet Tom Wanamaker, first lieutenant, XO of the company. Tom, I sat quietly while Tom read over my file, looked at a few figures on a page. He says, "I got just the place. I'm putting you in 3rd platoon, in our company, hotel company." He says, "That's my old platoon. You'll like these guys, and they'll take good care of you." Well, that was a high recommendation coming from a field officer. I mean, this guy had been on patrols with these guys. You know, they had history together, and I was so grateful. I really respected him. I memorized his face, and a long time later, he and I became buddies. I've been to his house, you name it,
Yeah.
So
Well, he took care of you in that moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I was a good fit for the platoon. I had a fire team leader named David Anderson. His nickname, everybody knew him as Andy. Andy was built like a squat gorilla. I mean, he had huge calf muscles and leg. I'm sure if this guy played football, he went through everybody on the field. He was shorter than I was by about half a foot. I'm 6 foot. He was about 5.5. I was glad when I hit 6 foot because I was always so stubby. I had to stand on tiptoes to see anything.
Right.
So by the time I got to be about 6 foot, I felt pretty good. I didn't realize I wouldn't fit in half the cars in the country, but
Right. Right. It's a whole different story. So you get to your platoon?
Pardon?
You're at your platoon and
Yeah,
you're
in the
meeting these
platoon.
guys
And it's our first night on a long patrol. So Andy is our point man. He's experienced. I found out later he'd been a corporal so many times they kept demoting him because he'd get drunk and they'd bust him and like to teach him a lesson, and it didn't stick.
Yeah.
They'd just promote him again. He'd get drunk and back down to PFC.
Some of the best NCOs that I ever worked with, though, were guys who'd been NCOs a couple of times. They learned a few things, I think.
Yeah.
So you're out on this patrol on your first night, and what's going on?
So we're going to an island. It's during the monsoon season. It's an island. It's called Ap Tui Tu, or Island Tui, and it's the name is TUI. And the way to get there is we have to rent boats from the local villagers who have houses up on stilts. We got to rent their boats to paddle our way to the island and go on patrol. So we do that. We get over there in late afternoon. We're patrolling the island. looking for Charlie. We didn't find him. And it gets dark, so we settle down for the night. So we wake up the next morning. We don't have any food with us. We're cold and damp from hiding in the jungle stuff that's always cold and damp.
Right.
So we're shivering. And I come to find out we weren't supposed to be out there overnight. We were supposed to be back in time for chow. They lost the boats.
Oh, no.
They couldn't remember where we put the boats. Because, I mean, patrolling around the island, they're concentrating so hard on the terrain, doing that by the time they come back to one end of the island, they don't remember where they hit, and they had to hide the boats.
Yeah.
So they'd be there in the morning, you know. And anyway, one of my new buddies, Michael Jacobson, called Jake, big tall Armenian kind of guy. He and I are still buddies. He lives in Pennsylvania. So Jake says to me, well, you know, we were supposed to be back last night at the base, but they couldn't remember where the boats are. I said, what do you mean they couldn't remember where the boats are? He says, you know where the boats are? I said, certainly. So he calls Andy over. Andy, look who knows where the boats are. Andy looks at me like, oh my God, I don't believe it. So he goes and gets Joe Satina, who's the squad leader. Calls Joe over. Look who knows where the boats are. You know, the FNG, the fucking new guy.
Right.
Said, all right, you idiot. Where are take us to the boats.
Yeah.
So I lead them right to the boats. And now they got, well, let's put it this way. They were all embarrassed heavily.
Well, yeah.
Like, the new guy knows where he doesn't have any experience and he knows where the boats are. So Andy turns to me and says, from now on, you got point. Like, you know so well, you're going to do this for, forever. Well, he didn't know it, but that was fine with me. I wanted to know
where you wanted to
going.
be anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got in the boats, we went back. And from then on, whenever we went somewhere, I was on point.
Mm-hmm.
Which meant Andy's fire team was on point. So the other team leader said, we're fine with that. We'd rather not walk point anyway.
Right.
And they all had this theory that first man shot is always the point man. Well, the radio man said the first man shot is always the radio man. The machine gunner said the first man shot is a machine gun. They all thought they were going to be the first man shot, if they did something.
Oh yeah.
So it was a joke. Anyway, we were stationed at Hill 190, which was north of Da Nang, and our hill was on like a red clay mountain finger,
Mm-hmm.
and in the wet season, the red clay was impassable. You could go down it. There's no way you could go back up it. You give us a week, we might get up to the base.
Yeah.
They had to bring in, amphibious equipment to haul us back up because there was just no way we could do it. And so that was a joke. But once I got down into the lowlands around the area, I started meeting the villagers, who were really nice people, if shy, number one.
Right.
Somewhat terrified of these giants walking around with black rifles. And the Viet Cong learned really quick to be aware of men with the black rifles.
Mm-hmm.
After meeting up so many with the M14s, somehow meeting up with the guys with the black rifles was like considered an omen. Like, you don't want to mess with those guys if you don't have to.
Yeah.
And I think it had more to do with the hitting power of the weapon. The M14 round was designed to tumble in a fashion that if it hit any part of the body that was solid, it'd tear it off.
Mm-hmm.
A leg, an arm, a hip, didn't matter. Rounds moving 2,800 feet per second.
It's going to do some damage.
was almost a flat trajectory. You learn not to lead a target if it's running. You aimed at it, because there's no way he's going to get faster than that bullet.
That's true.
And I had many firefights. Most of the time you couldn't see the enemy. They'd fire from in the bushes and the trees and things like that. And I learned to watch for the muzzle flashes or the smoke of the weapon or something like that. And I had the experience of dealing with snipers occasionally. And I considered myself expert enough to take snipers out. So if they fired and didn't get me, they were already dead.
Shame on them.
And it was a mistake.
Yeah. So did you, when you were on patrol, was it kind of a daily occurrence then to take small arms fire and all of that? Or was it just hit and miss?
It was hit and miss mostly. The only time you considered you're going to be in a drawn-out battle was if you're on an operation, which meant sweeping through an area that was bad.
And you knew there was going to be something there.
You were going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
And before I joined Hotel Company in the summer of '67, they were on a big op, and they had done really well. They really did a good, whatever the job they had, it was a blocking force, I don't know. They were good. And the battalion commander, a colonel named Love, told them that as long as he was battalion commander, if they ever need anything, come see him. So I've joined the company. We've got a new company commander. The NCOs have met him. The NCOs are worried. We got to get rid of this guy. He's going to get us all killed. I didn't know what the parameters were. I didn't have enough experience to know what the conditions were. But they wanted this guy gone. And they were willing to do anything to make him gone, short of actually hurting him.
Right.
Because Marines don't do that. We knew the Army did it because we heard stories, fragging and things like that. But that was not a Marine thing. Anyway, the Marines, so the NCOs gathered together, and they were from my platoon. And one morning, they got the company driver, who was a former member of our platoon, to get the company truck over. It was one of these 6x trucks with the stakes in the back.
Yeah.
So they said, we're going to battalion. So they get in the truck and they tell me, get aboard. You're a rifle guard or something, some ridiculous thing. We all have weapons. So we get aboard the truck. We drive down the red clay hill. And we go into 1st Marine Division where the battalion commander is. I'm looking at all the stuff, thinking, wow, this is great. Wonder when we ever get to use any of it, They knock on the colonel's door. And he's got an aide named Staff Sergeant Harkins. And Harkins was a very, very proper staff sergeant. Always had a pressed uniform on somehow.
In the middle of the jungle.
Stood very erect.
Yeah.
And he talked like a Muppet. Everything was, he'd bark an order, so you'd never see his teeth. I didn't even know if he had teeth.
Right.
And well, they knocked on the door. Said, we're here to see the colonel. Staff Sergeant Harkins told him, well, the colonel's a busy man. Like I've already given him a roster of things he's got to do.
Right.
And one corporal wasn't having any of it. He just said, lock and load, and that's all, because we responded immediately to any kind of a threat. So we all locked and loaded. And we were pointing our weapons at the sergeant. He says, I'll get him for you. You know, he goes inside. Like, you know, Colonel, a bunch of your boys are here, you know. So we put the weapons up. The colonel comes out. What's the problem? Colonel, you got to get rid of this captain. You know, he's an idiot. He doesn't understand anything. You know, whatever. And I have no idea where this is coming from.
Yeah.
I just happen to be there.
Yeah.
They order me to get on a truck, I get on a truck. They wanted my rifle along for some reason. So he says, all right, I'll take care of it. You know, give me a couple, 3 days. Don't worry about it. So we get on the truck, we go back. Sure enough, 3 days later, we got a brand new company commander again. This guy is a Mustanger.
Uh-huh.
He's a first lieutenant. He's gone up through the ranks. He's dressed in a uniform that's got so many creases in it, you can't touch him for fear of getting a razor blade cut, you know.
Right.
He's a short guy, but he looks really, I mean, he's a poster boy Marine.
Yeah.
If I wanted a Marine from a war zone that said, Marine, don't mess with me, this was the guy. Anyway, we're getting ready to go out on a night ambush. Door opens, and we have tents.
Uh-huh.
You know, we're living in tents with roll down covers on the sides, wood floors. So this first lieutenant walks in. So we're all jumping to attention. He says, Daddy. He says, what's going on? Well, sir, we're getting ready for a night ambush. So he decides to inspect the troops. First inspection I've ever had in Vietnam.
Right.
I think it was the last one.
Yeah. not something you really
It's
do.
not something we were. I mean, these guys I'm with are what we call salty.
Yeah.
They've been over there so long, their tours are almost up. And they've already forgotten more regulations than they ever learned. And clothing is one thing. They're wearing they're wearing scarves and other things you wouldn't believe. And
well, they probably don't have time for these shenanigans either. They want to.
oh no, they want to do the job and get back home and go to bed. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, if they got a bed to sleep in, that's considered a real privilege to sleep in a cot rather than curled up in a mud hole somewhere.
That's true.
And quite frankly, at that time, I was more used to the mud hole, so the cot was a weird thing. Anyway, he's chewing people out for not having polished boots. He's chewing people out for not having polished brass, you know, buckles and belts. And I'm thinking, the last thing you want on a night ambush is shiny brass and shiny boots. We deliberately get dirty on our way out so we'll blend in with the terrain when we hide.
It's camouflage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this guy's telling us to shine everything up and, you know, perform a marching ceremony somewhere. We're all looking at each other like, where the hell did this guy ever serve? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe he read a book.
Right.
He wanted to be like the college boys.
So he could be all dressed up, but he didn't know what he was doing.
So right away, we're back on the truck, going to battalion. So let me put it this way. In my first 2 weeks in Vietnam, I was in 3 mutinies.
Yeah.
All certifiable. All could have been court-martial offenses. We're back to see we've gone over the chain of command. We're going right back to the colonel. The colonel's waving the staff sergeant out of the way. I'll deal with him. Just let me deal with him. So he says, he comes to the door. He says, all right, I can fix this one more time. Just the pool is empty. There's nobody else to get.
Right.
So whatever this last guy is, that's what you got. You got to live with him. Yes, sir, we understand. And then the corporal asked, my squad leader, Joe Satina, asked the colonel, Is there anything we can do for you? So the colonel hems and haws, and he was a very distinguished looking colonel. I mean,
Yeah.
he was the kind of guy you wanted to see, you know.
Right.
He's looking, thinking, okay, well, you know, he's thinking, you can see his mind going very fast. He says, my problem is, I got this officer club over here, and I can show a movie or run the air conditioner, or I can show a movie and make popcorn. But I haven't got enough power to run the projector, the air conditioner, and the popcorn machine all at the same time. He said, I need a generator. So, you know, they said, thanks, sir, that's all we need to know. You need a generator. So we get back on the truck, we go back to company headquarters, get to the platoon, and now we're hemming around, they're all hemming around. Anybody know anything about a generator? Like, we don't even know where to go for something like that. Guess what? One hand goes up.
I know where there's a generator.
He said, what do you know about generators? I said, I don't know anything about generators, but I know there's one that weighs about 1.5 tons. Well, where's that? It's on Da Nang Air Base. Well, really? Is it accessible? I said, I'm pretty sure it is. Can you figure out a way to get it? I said, I think I already have. They said, what do you need? I said, I need one of those 40-foot long Army trucks, like the ones at our front gate in battalion there, because there was an Army detachment that had everything in trucks.
Yeah.
And there were 3 of these big long trucks sitting there. I said, I need the company driver. I need one of those trucks. I need a can of white paint and some little brushes. A little can of white paint, some brushes, and a clipboard. Like you're gonna steal somebody's generator with a clipboard and a little can of paint. They said, absolutely. We gotta see this. So of course, right away they go to work lining up the company driver and the can of paint and the brushes. So the company driver, his name really was Andy. So he comes to me and he says, what do I need to do? And I said, well, we go to battalion, you park the 6x behind battalion headquarters, walk over to the Army area, and steal one of those big long trucks. And I had learned that military vehicles don't have ignition keys. They just start.
Yeah, you just push a button.
That's it. So I figure a guy in the uniform can drive a truck, has a license, he'll get away with it.
Why not?
Yeah, nobody's asking for paper over there.
Right.
It's Vietnam. You're in a war. You're given verbal orders. You do things. So anyway, I said all we need is make sure there's a tarp on the back of it. I don't care. I want it to be empty. It has to have a tarp. So I've got 5 corporals, myself, and the driver. All the corporals want to be part of this. They don't know what they're doing, but they want to be part of it.
Yeah, they want to see this thing happen.
So I ordered the corporals to get under the tarp on the bed of the truck. Hang on. And don't talk whatever you do until we come get you. Don't move a muscle. All I wanted the MPs at the gate at Da Nang to see was a tarp with something under it.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to remember what they saw. They will have a general idea, but their minds won't pick up on shape or anything. So we drive into the Da Nang Air Base. The MPs at the gate are screening people leaving the base, like with a fine-tooth comb, using mirrors under the vehicle, all that stuff. But if you have American eyes, you can drive on the base with no problem at all. They don't even ask for ID. You look American, wave you right on the base. There's not enough time to do everything. So we drive on the base. I'm telling the driver where to go. We drive between the hangars and park, and sure enough, the generator's still there. Still collecting dust after 2.5, 3 weeks. I didn't think it would be there much longer, but because it's going to be getting hot pretty soon.
Right. Somebody's going to want it.
Yeah. Somebody ordered it. They're going to want it.
Yeah.
So they jump off the truck, and they said, "What do we do with the paint?" I said, "Who's an artist?" About 4 hands went up. Okay, 2 of you guys get the paint brushes, take the white paint, and I want you to mess up the numbers on that truck. I said, make 3s, turn them into 8s.
Yeah.
Make something like 1s, make them 9s. I said, I don't care if the numbers even match, just screw with them. And of course, they were happy as larks to go over there and start messing everything up.
Oh, yeah.
Just to get back at the military, Every dirty job they made me do, I'm going to do this, So 3s became 8s and that kind of thing. So, and they did it to both trucks.
Yeah.
I said, you don't have to match them, just screw with them. And then the corporals all stood around and looked at me, and the generator's 1.5 tons. They looked at me and they yelled, "How the hell are we going to switch that to our truck? Like, you need a crane to get that thing." I looked at them like, "You idiots, we're not going to just, move it. We're going to switch the trucks. What do you think we brought one for?" I could have just stolen the truck, but then it would have been, the generator would have been gone and somebody would have raised the alarm. I'm switching the trucks and leaving one with an empty tarp on it. So somebody stole the generator out from under the tarp. It's got to be here somewhere.
Right. They couldn't have gotten far.
It'll take them a month to go through the space and find out it's not there. And they looked at me like I just wrote the script of the best movie ever,
Yeah.
And they were pretty thrilled. Like, hey, he's a my fire team,
Right.
that kind of, or my squad, So again, I had him hiding under the tarp with the generator. Andy and I are in the cab, and I have a clipboard. And on this clipboard is every paper I could find in the trash area all day long. Cigarette wrappers, copies of stenciled weather reports, anything. Just shove stuff in the clipboard. So we're number 3 at the gate. They're inspecting a vehicle, a sedan. And they get people out of the sedan and they hunt through they're looking for contraband, any kind.
Right.
They check it. Everything's fine. They wave the driver on. And it's another Jeep or something. And they do the same thing and they look underneath with the mirrors and somebody trying to steal a refrigerator or something, Anything.
Right.
They wave them on. Now it's our turn. So I told Andy, I said, just pull up and relax. And I said, whatever you do, pay no attention to what comes out of my mouth. It's all bilge. Anyway, these 2 Goliath MPs, they didn't need to stand on the running board. They were already looking in, but they did. They climbed on the running boards. And I'm yelling at Andy, "You stupid son of," and I don't swear, so I don't have
Right.
those words in my vocabulary, but "You dumb Marine, blah, blah, blah." And I am waving this clipboard at him so fast and so close, he's ducking.
Yeah.
Instinctively, he's looking with real terror in his eyes. And of course, he's not saying a word because I ordered him. I told him, "Don't you dare say a word."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm yelling, "You this and that. The colonel told us to be back at something hours. That was 20 minutes ago, and you had to go somewhere, and the MPs are watching this act, and they finally thought, "Oh, this guy's got enough trouble," so they just waved him on. So Andy and I stopped, about 3/4 of a mile down Highway 1 and pulled off because we were laughing so hard we couldn't even breathe. And of course, the guys in the back are clueless. They
Right.
didn't hear anything. So Andy's driving with tears running down his cheeks. He thinks, I tell this story, nobody's ever going to believe it. You know, we went through the MPs like they weren't even there, you know. So we drive back to 1st Marine Division. Of course, it's a big truck. They just wave us right in. We pull up in front of battalion headquarters and step on the wooden steps and go up the porch and knock on the door, and we're here to see the colonel. I'll get him. So,
He didn't even fight you this time.
so the colonel comes up, and the colonel starts, wait a minute, I told you guys that was the last time. I said, no, sir, you don't understand. Like, he looks at him like, what don't I understand? I mean, here's an elephant in the living room, you know?
Yeah.
It's right there. So I spoke up. I said, sir, we got your generator. And this man's mind was so fast. He says, he took one look at that big hulky tarp for the generator. Said, here's what you do. He says, you drive this thing down into that ravine down there. And 1st Marine Division was built on a gravel pit that supplied all the crushed gravel for Highway 1 and some other roads.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a dugout mountain is what it is. And there is one deep pocket. And they had a little tiny smokehouse hut there, like an outhouse almost.
Yeah.
And he says, here's what you do. You drive the truck down there. He says, I'll have somebody put this thing in there and bury it. And they'll bury all the wires coming out of it. And I'll run the wires underground over to the mess hall or the officers club.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't thinking about 1st Division or anything. I mean, this thing could have powered a city.
Right.
But he's just thinking, I just want to power the officers club. That was his goal. We got him a generator, and that's what he was going to do. And the reason is because until he got everything running over there, the Red Cross girls wouldn't come out to visit his officers.
Right.
And he wanted to supply girls for the officers.
That was important.
That was his thing.
Yeah.
He could have guests, you know. And the girls would make everything wonderful, like almost like you saw on TV, like on MASH, you know.
Yeah.
Imagine what I thought when I watched MASH years later. Like,
Right.
yeah, you can write this stuff, and people will believe it. They'll laugh at it and think it's stupid, but they won't understand it really happens.
Stuff like that really happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not fake.
So we delivered the generator. We got back on our truck, went back to our base.
Mm-hmm.
New Year's came, and there was a whole lot of shooting. We had a second lieutenant for platoon commander. His name was Stewart. He'd been out with us maybe twice on patrols. In 2 patrols, I learned he couldn't read a compass. He didn't understand how to use a map. And I talked to my squad leader about him, and I said, what are our obligations as far as this lieutenant? And squad leader and my platoon, or my squad leader and my team leader both told me, says, well, here's the rule. Bring him back in the same number of pieces you take him out. That's the only rule.
Uh-huh.
So my job, aside from being the point man, was to make sure this idiot didn't get hurt while we were out. Sometimes I had to almost sit on him to get him to stay down, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an eye on him all the time. I always knew exactly where I knew where I was. I knew exactly where he was. But we always brought him back untouched, unscathed. And we liked the guy. He was personable. He looked out for us as a platoon,
Mm-hmm.
you know. He would argue with the captain if the captain wanted to give us extra duty compared to some other platoon, and they didn't have a turn yet. You know, he'd actually get in I saw him get in a fist fight one time with another lieutenant.
Really?
Because the other guy was acting up, speaking out of turn and demanding stuff. And I watched the two of them roll down the hill fighting each other. I thought, boy, that's a stand-up guy. Yeah.
That's yeah. You don't see that very often.
No, you don't. And I still remember that day really well. Anyway, Lieutenant Stewart, his fellow officers called him Jeb. That was his nickname.
Uh-huh.
We never did. We never looked to him for information other than what's the patrol route? Where are we supposed to be going? And sometimes he'd share that with us, and sometimes he wouldn't. He says, I'll tell you when we get there. Well, that worried us because we were never going to get there.
Right. You're going to be lost if that was the case.
I remember one patrol. This was after TEP. We're on this patrol, and we were stationed at Liberty Bridge. Just after January 1st, they moved us to Liberty Bridge, which was southwest of Da Nang, between Da Nang and An Hoa, the next air base. And the Seabees had built a wonderful tree trunk piled bridge to carry trucks and tanks and Vietnamese, but carry all the military stuff you could think of. It was a beauty until the monsoon came. And the monsoon washed the bridge out like it wasn't even there. It was made out of toothpicks.
Yeah.
So naturally, they're going to rebuild it exactly the same way they built it the first time. That was military thinking. So the Seabees had an underground compound on the base. They lived in it. You never saw them unless they were working on the bridge, and then they disappeared. So they weren't around at night. You didn't see them early in the morning when we were worried about snipers and things. So we're at Liberty Bridge, and we control both sides of the river. We have a low side, it's all sand, and then we have a hill on the other side. And the bridge is going to span in between. So the Seabees are building this bridge, and it's getting closer and closer. They're actually making progress. I don't know how, but it was actually getting
Right.
closer and closer and closer.
Coming together.
Pretty soon they'd be able to lay something bigger than a 2x4 across and walk it over from one side to the other. In the meantime, we were using small boats. They had these little fiberglass boats with, I think it was Johnson outboards on the back, and they'd motor us across the river back and forth. And if you had night duty on the other side with a hill, that meant you had no source for food or water. You had only what you could carry. One bad example of that was we were over there one day. We had been on patrol. And everything on that side of the river was considered red territory. In other words, it was an open fire zone. If you saw something moving, you shot at it.
Yeah.
Unless it was a water buffalo. You were not allowed to kill water buffaloes. The government had to pay farmers $500 a head every time some dumbass Marine shot one. So you're not allowed to kill water buffaloes. Anyway, because that was a farmer's truck, it carried everything.
Yeah, they were important.
Yeah. And it was renewable energy because it had baby water buffaloes.
Right.
And you'd see these little tiny kids leaving these big animals around by a ring in their nose, and they carry a little swatch, and those big buffaloes would do anything that little kid wanted him to do the first time, because they didn't want that kid whacking him with that swatch.
Right. I'm sure that they learned that over time.
Yeah.
So what was the rest of that tour like? I mean, it sounds like it was, as far as Vietnam goes, it doesn't sound like it was a bad tour of duty, but did things happen over there that were bad?
Yeah. Yeah. About being on the wrong side of the bridge.
Yeah.
We're over there one night. We've been on patrol all day. Most of us are out of water. We both carried 2 canteens, and if you had a drop left in either one, you were doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Except for me. I never drank much. I just didn't need it. I was always hydrated. I never felt dehydrated. And I usually kept probably at least a half a canteen going for me at the end of the day, even in the heat.
Yeah.
And more often than that, I shared that with somebody who was looking pretty poor at the time, you know,
Right.
because I wanted to keep them alert. So, surprisingly, we got an order to pass our canteens up. The captain has ordered the canteens to be collected, and he'd get them filled for us.
Mm-hmm.
And normally, on the low side of the river, we had a water buffalo. It was a tank on wheels, which would get towed to Da Nang to a secure site, filled with fresh water, and towed back out. And they'd fill the canteens, they'd cooking water and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They'd fill canteens from that. So that's what we expected. Water buffalo hadn't made the trip that day. Had no water. So the captain ordered the canteens to be filled in the river. And the river at Liberty Bridge was the Song Thu Bong, the Blue River.
Mm-hmm.
Very fast flowing, very dangerous river. We were allowed to wet our feet on the edge, but nobody was allowed to go into the water for fear we'd have an accidental drowning.
Right.
When the Army held the bridge before us, you had 2 companies, one on each side. They'd get a couple drownings every other week. Somebody tried to swim the river and got carried away, and they'd
Yeah.
find them 2 days later bloated on a sandbar somewhere. So it was a no-no. You were not allowed to swim in the river. Well, we also suspected the NVA above us, coming out of the mountains by Anwa, were poisoning the water.
Mm-hmm.
They were throwing dead animals in there, cows, whatever, chemicals. We didn't know what they were using, but there was a strong, the Vietnamese wouldn't drink the water,
Right. You guys shouldn't be drinking it either.
so we were pretty sure we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, the captain had our canteens filled and ordered somebody to tell us to use halazone tablets, which are bacteria killers for, like, if you use a well water or something.
Right. They don't take care of chemicals though.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they don't work on river water.
Right.
So most of us, I should say all of us, knew better than to drink river water. You could be dying and you wouldn't drink river water.
Right.
So here we are, full canteens, wow, and we start drinking our canteens. Well, halfway through the night, human beings are turning into pretzels. The muscle cramps are so bad. They medevaced about 5 or 6 guys. We never saw them again. And that was by chopper
Yeah.
in the dark, which was very unusual.
Which means it was bad.
And they realized that the rest of us we just couldn't even stand watch. We were pretty crippled up. So they had joined the bridge close enough to put some planks over it.
Mm-hmm.
So we abandoned the hill, went back to the other side, and I spent the night going from a foxhole up to the shitter, as we
Right.
call it, the head. Half the night, my platoon commander, Second Lieutenant Stewart, was in there with me. You know, we do our business, get emptied, crawl away. Hour and a half later, we're back in there together, going through this, and I mean, the diarrhea was excruciating. It was very uncomfortable. And where I got any material left in me, I never knew. But this was all night long. I was doing this back and forth, And I get to my hole, which I shared with one of my buddies, and it happened to be Bobby Lewis, who I originally was part of the Lewis, Clark, and Roach deal.
Yep.
He and I got to be good friends. He was from New York. And fortunately, he hadn't drunk the water.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to stand watch all night while I was crumpled up in the bottom of the hole. And I could barely do anything. I couldn't think. I couldn't see anything. My night vision was gone.
It's pretty bad stuff, or whatever was in that river.
Yeah. In fact, when I needed to go up to the head, Bobby had to help me up and point me in the right direction. And I couldn't carry a weapon because
Oh, yeah.
I had no energy. So anyway, the next day the corpsman started filling us with these black charcoal pills and kaopectate,
Uh-huh.
which looks like a big bottle of shoe polish.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking this stuff by the gallon.
Oh.
I don't know where they got all these kaopectate from, but man, I couldn't get enough of it. I was so dehydrated. And wouldn't you know, they bundled us up to go to another base. I think it was Alpha 17. They were on an operation, and they wanted us to move in and take their barracks over and base over,
Mm-hmm.
and the patrol routes while they were gone. First time we ever did that. So we were up there, and I went on patrol, and I got the cramps hit me. And I mean, I turned into a pretzel. My buddies helped me up. We quit the patrol. They dragged me back. And the corpsman's looking at me like, what am I supposed to do with this, you know?
Right.
So they fixed me up with charcoal pills and kaopectate again. And this time he gives me a handful of pills, and he says, take 2 of these now, and take 2 every 4 hours. They're Darvon,
Mm-hmm.
which is a painkiller. Look,
Strong painkiller at that.
I don't know if it's a narcotic or not, but
Yeah.
it's supposed to be strong. I have no idea what I'm taking at the time.
Right.
So I'm supposed to take 2 and take 2 every 4 hours. I look at my watch and I said, okay. And I put them in my flak jacket pocket. 2 hours later, another corpsman comes to me. Take 2 of these now and 2 every 4 hours.
Oh, no.
Well, in my situation, I couldn't even tell they were the same pill.
Right.
So I take 2 more. So now I'm taking 2 Darvon every 2 hours. Inside of 6 hours, you couldn't hurt me with a brick.
No.
I mean, I have turned into John Wayne. And I'm going to be John Wayne. And so I get detailed for a bunker watch
Mm-hmm.
down at the main gate for the night. So I report. Turns out we got to climb a ladder to get on top of this huge bunker. And they give me 2 F&Gs from another outfit. Their first night in the field in Vietnam, and they're sitting on top of this bunker. There's no way I'm going to trust my life to 2 F&Gs.
No.
Together, I wouldn't trust my life with them. So I already know I'm going to be up all night. So I just let them sleep. So there's a guy going around every 15 minutes checking to make sure somebody's on watch and writing their initials down in the column.
Mm-hmm.
It never occurs to somebody that every night, or that night, every 15 minutes, they're writing the same 2 initials down in the column
No one figured
all
that
night
out.
long. So I'm up all night.
Yeah.
And I am wired. I mean, I'm so wide awake, and I can see everything from miles away. You know, I mean, and there's nobody going to surprise me over there. And so anyway, the next morning, one of the new guys says to the other one, I don't remember standing watch last night, do you? He says, I don't. Oh my gosh, do you think this was a test? Do you think we fell asleep on watch and they were testing us to see if we'd report it?
Right.
So they go to their platoon, their squad leader,
Oh,
and
no.
report that neither one of them can remember standing watch. Well, the squad leader thought that was a little odd. So he goes to his platoon sergeant and says, you know, my two guys were assigned to a bunker watch by some guy from a hotel company, and they don't remember standing watch. So their platoon sergeant goes to my platoon sergeant. My platoon sergeant was one of the most stand-up Marines I ever met. Staff Sergeant Tony McCall, Anthony McCall.
Mm-hmm.
He's from New York, black man. He's on his second tour. And from the day I met him, I had nothing but respect for the man. He knew his business. He knew how to read maps. He
Right.
understood what a compass was.
Important things like that.
Yeah, he still relied on me to know exactly where we were, but he knew the general area.
Yeah.
I was impressed he knew where we were on a map to start with. And when I met him, he had us do an inspection. I stood up, handed him my rifle and everything. He looked everything over. He says, I hear you're pretty tight Marine, you know, like you know your job. And I just looked him right in the eye and said, just doing my job, Staff Sergeant.
Yeah.
Give me a job, I'll do it. And
So they go to him about these two guys who didn't stand their watch.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, they go to their sergeant, and
Right.
he
Who
goes to
comes
my
to,
sergeant.
yeah.
So my sergeant says, let's check the duty roster. So they go up to the command hut and get the log of whose initials were on watch at the bunker. Mine. DR all the way down. They know that's not doctor.
Right.
So he goes to my corpsman and says, what are you doing with Roach? What's going on? So the corpsman looks at it and says, oh my God, I don't know. That doesn't look right. Like, so they're looking around for me. And they say, well, where's Roach? I mean, he's out with another outfit on patrol.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted somebody who was familiar with the terrain, and he took them out to teach them a patrol route. So I'm going all day on a patrol in a night ambush. And there's no way to get to talk to me about what's going on.
Right.
It turns out I'm up another night because I'm out with guys I don't know, and if I don't know them, I don't trust them. So I stay up another night. And I'm still popping 2 pills every 2 hours until I run out.
Right.
So anyway, I come back in. Turns out I was up 52 and a half hours. And no food, very little water, just what I'm taking with the pills. And I'm ready to go again, you know.
Yeah.
And so the platoon commander sat down with my squad leader and the corpsman says, whatever you do, you've got to get this guy and pin him down until he goes to sleep, because he's going to be out a long time.
Yeah.
Remember, we're helping this guy. He's not in trouble. We're not trying to force him to do anything except take a break. And that might be a problem, because the corpsman here tells me he could be psychotic at this point. So whatever you do, before you do it, get that damn weapon away from him.
Right.
You can't let him have a weapon or access to one, whatever you do. So I come in from this other platoon patrol. My guys are all sitting, and again, we're not in our own area, we're in Alpha 17. So we've got bunks assigned to us.
Mm-hmm.
So mine was against a wall somewhere. So I come back in. These guys are all playing cards or chit-chatting. You know, I go over to my bunk, and the first thing I do is set my rifle against the wall. It's empty. I've already
Right.
cleared it. But even empty, it's too much a threat. I can load it too fast. And one thing I did over there, different than anybody else, is all my ammunition was tracer.
Mm-hmm.
I never fired ball ammunition, not after the first few weeks. Once I found out a way to get my hands on tracers, I went strictly to tracer. And my weapon had a chrome bore and a chrome chamber. I kept it very clean and never had a misfire. And when I fired that thing automatic, it looked like a laser beam.
Wow.
You think Star Wars was something? Not compared to me. I'm back in Vietnam. I served with Hotel Company my entire tour.
Okay.
I was in 3rd Platoon my whole entire tour. I started off in 3rd Squad. January 1st, last week of 1967, we had been through Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming up on the first of the year. Everything in Vietnam was fairly quiet at that time. And we got roused very early one morning and told we had to recover an Air Force drone. It just happened to be on top of a waterfall.
Oh no.
So here I am, point man, got a 30-foot rope over one shoulder, my M16 over the other shoulder. The guy behind me is covering me and climbing. I'm leading point, climbing up the waterfall, and it was really like a series of rapids.
Mm-hmm.
It would kind of tilt back to where it was a comfortable climb, and then go more vertical again. So this was an escapade going up this stupid creek, and the Air Force was flying recon drones, taking pictures. And the drone would fly back towards Da Nang. A helicopter would be sent after it. And the helicopter's job was to snag it while it was flying.
Oh,
They
okay.
called it Operation Skyhook. I never did see how that worked, but that's what I was told.
Uh-huh.
Well, once in a while, the helicopter missed. The drone ran out of fuel and glided down to Earth.
So just so I understand, Don, these things didn't really land then themselves.
No.
You had to go snatch them out of the air.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
bag them in the air.
Yeah. All right.
So I guess if you had a big enough net or whatever, you could do it. And of course, some of those helicopter pilots were really good.
Mm-hmm.
They could maneuver those things like crazy, which really piqued my interest as a young aviator, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So we were climbing the waterfall. We got about 2/3 of the way up, and my lieutenant, Second Lieutenant Stewart, same guy, caught up to us. And he looked at my boots, which were leather drill boots. Everybody else had jungle boots with the big cleats and everything. They didn't have my size. I had a narrow foot. Everything they had was 12 wide or bigger.
Right.
So I just couldn't wear them. I couldn't even walk in them. So he looked at my boots, ordered me back down the waterfall to where he had placed a fire team as security.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure nobody's coming up after us. He says, go down and meet Corporal Molenpaugh's team and stay with them. So I got to trade off the rope, and it's very dangerous climbing down wet rocks. So I'm climbing down these rocks, and it was a pretty long climb. And I spy Sergeant Molenpaugh's fire team. They're on the other side of the waterfall. So he's waving me over. So, like I said, it's a series of rapids. So I'm dancing across these giant boulders that are soaking wet with my leather-soled shoes.
Probably not really that stable.
No. And I take a leap to the last one, and of course, my foot slips right off the rock. I go into the water. It was a very fast-flowing waterfall. All I could think to do was stick my rifle straight up in the air, and this huge paw comes out of nowhere and grabs the muzzle of my rifle one-handed and hoists me out of the pool of the waterfall and puts me down on dry land. I mean, I was so stunned. I thanked him.
Yeah.
But I had no idea he had that much power. I mean, he was a pretty big guy, but
It's a lot of strength.
he had a lot of strength.
Yeah.
He was the strongest guy in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard years later from my friend, the executive officer, he says, you know, there's only one Marine in hotel company I wouldn't want to fight, and that'd be Sergeant Molival. Well, he was corporal then.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm soaking wet, sitting there until everybody else comes back down. And they had an Air Force tech sergeant with them.
Mm-hmm. Hang on one second. I got to figure out how to turn this thing off. I don't understand why it keeps doing this call. Okay. We'll just have to live with it.
Yeah,
I guess.
that's a call button from one of the bedrooms.
I wonder if I can just maybe mute it a little bit so it doesn't. There we go. We'll see what happens. I'll have to figure it out. Okay. So I'm sorry. So they had an Air Force tech sergeant with them?
Yeah, and he actually removed the cameras from the drone. The Air Force didn't care about the drone, it was booby trap. So anybody trying to do anything with that drone was going to blow themselves to kingdom come. But they wanted the cameras and the film.
Okay.
And he was able to successfully retrieve those. So the mission was a success. And we get transported back to our base.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an alert probably the next morning or so, and they thought the communists were coming down from the mountains above us. That area is called Leech Valley, with good reason. And they put us on top of Amtraks.
Oh.
So here we are in a half dozen Amtraks motoring up this river. And it's pitch black, can't see anything. And all of a sudden these flares started going off right above us, like 81 millimeter mortar flares.
Right.
And I thought it was NVA. Turned out they were ours, and the drivers were calling in so they could see the water.
Oh, okay. So you're cruising along and you see these flares going off. It turns out it's...
And they scared the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I thought for sure we were all going to get killed. Well, nothing happened. Turned out we never did find anybody. So we got back on the Amtraks and came all the way back to the base. And the red clay road going to the base was so bad they actually had to drive us up with the tracks so we could get back to our barracks. And we basically just laid down exhausted all day. We'd been up for many hours.
Yeah.
We hadn't had any food, no coffee. We were just done. And I think if anybody attacked at that time, we'd have said, "Oh, come, just let them have it."
Right.
You know, we'll play again next week. You know?
Yeah.
Well, that night there was live fire coming from the lines. We had the night off, so we were in our tents with the shades down and everything, and we heard gunfire from the lines, the M60 machine gun. So the platoon was scrambling. Everybody was grabbing gear, and Lieutenant Stewart came in the door, told the squad leaders to get everybody moving to the lines, and then pointed at me and he handed me a paper bag. He says, "You, put that together. I'll see you later." And they all ran out the door. So here I am, the FNG, the new guy,
Right.
all by myself. I got a paper bag. So I figured, well, I might as well see what's in the paper bag. So I dumped it on my cot. It was a few tools and a 1911 .45 automatic, disassembled to the smallest piece, not field stripped,
Right.
like we'd been trained.
Yeah.
This thing was completely disassembled, like an armorer would do it.
Oh no.
Well, my first thought was, what can I do with this? Well, I thought about it for a minute, and my dad had a Popular Mechanics magazine on his tool bench that I read through thoroughly when I was a kid, and it had a diagram of a 1911. And I actually memorized it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to reassemble this 1911, put all the little springs and little trigger things in and all that, and actually worked it several times, and everything functioned the way it was supposed to. And I couldn't test fire it, but
Yeah.
I didn't even have ammunition for it or anything like that. So I just put it back in the bag with the tools and waited for the group to get back. So they all came back, and turned out the gunners on the line had shot a pig.
That's what all the noise was.
The whole base was on alert because there was a wild boar running around.
Oh no.
They wanted to barbecue it. I don't even think it was that big, and by the time the M60 got done with it, I don't think there was anything left.
Oh yeah.
So I went back to the lieutenant's office, handed him the bag, and he was pretty surprised. He opened it up and saw his pistol in there, and was like, well, thank God for that, because like I knew he was stuck. He couldn't figure out what to do.
Oh yeah.
And I just said, "You're welcome, sir," and I walked out. Well, anyway, a day later, we moved from Hill 190 north of Da Nang. We were transferred to Liberty Bridge, southwest of Da Nang, and on the road to Anhua.
Mm-hmm.
And the bridge had been built by the Seabees originally. Huge, thick pilings, a lot of them, you know, going across this marshland, connecting one dry road to another. On the north side of the river, it was all sand, flat land. On the south side, there was a hill,
Mm-hmm.
and the road went up and around the hill. So that's where they built the base. Each side had barbed wire around it, that kind of thing. And on the low side, the Seabees had dug bunkers underground to live in. They actually had a little city down there. They could watch movies, play tennis, or table tennis,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Because they needed off time after building a bridge. You know, that was hard work.
Right.
We had to go out on patrols and things, walk miles and miles a day in the hot sun, trying to keep them safe.
You probably rather would have built a bridge, right?
Oh, we were all ready to transfer over to the Seabees. That was a no-brainer. And well, anyway, they built this bridge. The pilings were so close together that the monsoon washed it out. Now, the monsoons happen every year.
Uh-huh.
This is not a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Not a surprise that
No.
it was going to rain.
So naturally, they're going to rebuild the bridge exactly the way they built the first one.
Mm-hmm.
We thought that was the dumbest idea in the world. Like, what are you going to do with the next monsoon?
Right.
Ground's going to give away, the pilings will disappear, and you'll be back here again for another year. Maybe that's what they wanted.
Right.
They liked building that bridge.
Or, I mean, you're not going to be there next year anyway, right?
Yeah.
So,
We didn't know where we'd be.
yeah.
So the base originally was held by 2 companies of Army. Well, the Army lost some men trying to swim in the river. They got drowned. There was a no swimming policy on the river. You could put your feet in it, but that was it. No deeper. And the Army moved out. We moved in with 1 company of Marines. So we had a platoon on either side of the river and 1 platoon for patrols and night ambushes, that kind of thing. The 4th platoon was a weapons platoon. So they had machine gun positions, rocket positions, that kind of thing. They didn't actually go on patrols with us because we didn't have enough men to support carrying those big weapons. And now, when we got to Liberty Bridge, we'd had no information about it. We were never given maps. All we knew is we were replacing 2 companies of Army. And I say, well, they value us, every platoon is a company of Army, so that shows we're ranked pretty high.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
They think we're going to live through this. So the day we get to Liberty Bridge, there were barracks already set up for us. We moved in. And before I could unpack my gear, Lieutenant Stewart, our platoon commander, came in, said, Roach, take a fire team down to the bridge and provide security for the Mike boat. Well, I gave him an aye, aye, sir, and a salute, and
Went on your way.
that was it.
Yeah.
I grabbed 3 guys, said, you're in my fire team. Get your gear, let's go.
Uh-huh.
And I stopped at Supply long enough to grab a radio, PRC 25. We called it a Prick 25. It was a backpack radio.
Very familiar with those. They're not light either. They're pretty heavy.
It's about 25 pounds.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like much on a nice day.
Right.
But in the sun at 110 degrees, not so much fun. Anyway, I took the radio, even though I was a fire team leader. I had 2 big guys with me, Jake and Jose, and a shorter guy. And Jose a lot of times got stuck with carrying the radio because he was basically lazy. He'd act stupid just to get out of duty. So they'd stick him with the radio to kind of try and teach him a lesson like,
Yeah.
hey, maybe you want to step up and show what you know as opposed to just humping something like, heavy like a radio. Well, as a fire team leader, I needed the radio close to me. I was going to be the one had to be answering commands from wherever and report where we were and if ever call in for support. So I have no idea what a Mike boat is. So I found a bridge. Figured we can't miss that. So we found a bridge, and on the upriver side of it was this big landing craft, big enough to carry a tank. And I figured, well, that must be what a Mike boat is. So I looked around, we didn't see anybody. So I banged on the hull of the tank with my rifle, and a guy appeared up in the wheelhouse area, and I assumed he was a chief petty officer because that's what it took to control one of those things.
Yeah.
And I yelled up, "Hi, Chief, we're your security." And he seemed real surprised. And he lowered the ramp. Well, come aboard. So we walked on the boat. And his job was basically to ferry vehicles back and forth across the river while the bridge was under construction.
Okay.
And time permitting, they let on villagers, farmers with produce and fish and everything. They were going somewhere else to sell their products, So I assumed our job was to make sure that civilians weren't carrying munitions
Right.
or something that could blow up the boat and cause a fire or another problem. and we were just going to ride back and forth across the river. Well, we sat there all morning. We never moved. There was no traffic. There were no passengers. We just sat there, sitting on the beach,
Mm-hmm.
and the four of us were kind of cross-legged on the bottom of the hull of the boat, waiting for something to do. And the chief, thinking that we had security, meant he was free to do what he wanted.
Oh.
So next thing you know, the ramp comes up, the engines roar into life, brum, 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 and the boat backs off the river, turns upstream, and away we go. Well, this hull was pretty deep. I actually couldn't see over the side unless I was on my tiptoes
Uh-huh.
and hanging on to something. and so I could see the tops of trees, but I couldn't see much level. I couldn't really get high enough to see level. And we're going up, I know we're going up the river. Again, I have no maps.
Right.
So I'm in my head, I'm counting off how many minutes we're moving. And about what I figure the average speed was based on the trees going by. And of course, the river is winding, so I don't know how far we're getting away from the base horizontally, but I know approximately how many miles we've gone up the river.
Right.
So I kind of used the rule of thumb. I thought, well, chop about a third of the winding road off to get the actual distance from the base. So I pretty much knew where I was. And we were roaring. It was like one of those movies about Vietnam where you see the houses where the villagers have huts in the trees and the people are eating lunch,
Yeah.
20 feet off the ground. And of course, we're seeing the my level. And I'm literally watching kids eating their breakfast as we went by, and I'm waving to the kids, and they're waving back. And they're surprised because they've never seen this before, and I'm surprised because I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
So it was a real eyeful. And the chief was back up at the wheel. I could see him, and he was just merrily steering us away. And I hadn't seen any other sailors at this point. And we came around a bend, and on the north side of the river, there was a bank. And on the bank were 6 figures in black pajamas, which is what they all wore anyway.
Uh-huh.
And they're on the beach doing something. Can't quite see what, but they're all crouched over on the beach. Well, the chief takes one look at them, and he yells, "VC!" And he pours on the coal, and we're heading right directly at them. They don't have any weapons, or they don't even have a bow and arrow.
Right.
No spear guns, no nothing. So they're scattering. And the chief yells, "Man the 50." And I'm thinking, these guys have a 50? And I'm looking like, I haven't even
Where's
seen
it
that
at?
yet. Well, sure enough, a guy comes up behind him with a 50 caliber in his arm, but mounts it on the side of the hull,
Mm-hmm.
and quickly manages to load it. And the chief yells, "Fire the 50." Well, the seaman fires 50 rounds directly over the side. I'm getting wet
Uh-huh.
from the splashes.
Yeah.
The chief is up there just like in a comedy. He's got his hat. He's got, "Not at the water," and he's beating the guy over the head with his hat.
Oh,
He
no.
says, "Fire at the shoreline, you idiot!" So next thing you know, the stream of of course, by now there's nobody there.
Right.
So a stream of tracers goes out over the shoreline. And I tell you, being that close to the 50 caliber for the first time in my life, I didn't like being ahead of that thing. I wanted to be behind it.
Uh-huh.
But just a steady sound. Didn't have to reload that thing and had 100 rounds in the belt. And so we motor up to the shoreline. The ramps go down. My team looks at me and I yell, "Let's do it. We're going to make a beach landing."
Okay.
This was the first beach landing of 1968 by the Marine Corps.
Was it well documented?
I mean, day one,
Yeah.
January 1st. We're landing on the beach. My team's ashore. I'm getting my feet wet, and the radio comes to life. It's the company captain. I know his voice well. No procedure, no call signs, none of that military jargon, just, where the hell's my microphone?
Oh, no.
And I can hear the radio going off in front of the chief petty officer, so I know he's hearing us too. So I'm looking up at him.
Mm-hmm.
My guys have stopped. They've heard noises on the radio. They've stopped moving. And again, the captain yells, where's my microphone? Somebody better answer me. So I clicked on my microphone and I reported back. It said, hotel. This is Hotel 333. That was my call sign. 3rd platoon, 3rd squad, 3rd fire team. Hold 333 actual, meaning
It's
team
you.
leader.
Yeah.
We're Mike Boat Security, and we're about 4 clicks west of hotel. So I told them exactly where we were. 4 clicks is a pretty good, we're outside of mortar range, so they can't do anything to provide help for us.
Right.
We're a long way before anybody can get to us. And again, I have no maps. I don't know what the hell the territory's called, anything. I can hear him banging the handset on his desk. He's literally beating the desk. Like, but he's so frustrated. He's beside himself. And then he comes back on the air. You better tell that chief petty officer to pick up his handset. I know he's ignoring me. Point your rifle at him. Aye, aye, sir. So I point my rifle at him. He picks up his handset. And he doesn't say a word. The captain comes over. You get those Marines on board and turn that boat around immediately. And get back here. So I wave my guys on board. Ramp comes up, turn around, we motor back down the river towards the bridge area. And the captain, not finished yet. He's still trying to figure out what the hell happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want to admit that this chief petty officer had the audacity to go for a joyride without permission,
Yeah.
or orders or anything. And what if we had business back where was he on it? You know, he was missing from his duty station with the bike boat.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what kind of charges the captain wanted to bring. Anyway, it took us over an hour to get back, even moving at 5 speed. It took us over an hour to get back to the bridge. So 4 clicks distance this way met probably 10 clicks of maneuvering around river bends,
You had the,
zigzagging our way back,
yeah.
scraping over sandbars and things like that. So we get back to the bridge. Captain can hear us plainly now. And the radio comes to life. And he yells, team leader. At least he knew I was a fire team leader. He didn't know who I was, but knew. He said, team leader, you march that chief up here under arms. You copy? Copy, sir. We'll go. Didn't know what else to say. Sounded good in the movies.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where they got it from, right?
So I marched the chief petty out. And the chief is looking at me like, really? And I'm looking at him like, play the game.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
You got to play the game.
Yeah.
So he knows I'm not going to shoot him. You know, where's he going to go?
Yeah.
I might hit him with the rifle, but I'm not going to shoot him.
Sounds like the CO was just trying to make a point.
So we get to the duty hut, which was underground. The captain clears it out, except for the three of us, has me standing there with a rifle, and he dressed that chief petty officer down as best he knew how. Threatened to send him to the Aleutian Islands. You know, I mean, the chief probably heard this before. I had a pretty good feeling he was an instigator. Smart ass. I mean, he wore his uniform crooked, his hat was on sideways, you know, I mean,
just doing what he wanted to do, right?
All the signs were there. This guy was not going to comply with much of anything.
Right.
He was salty.
Yes. He'd probably been around for a while.
That's what I mean. He was
Absolutely,
salty.
yes.
That's what we called it, being Navy.
Yeah.
And so when he got through with the chief, he sent him packing, and it was under strict orders. Your job is that's my boat, not yours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I signed for it, it's mine, and it stays right by the bridge and just goes back and forth. That's all it does. It doesn't go anywhere else. And he had me remain while the chief left.
Mm-hmm.
Then he took me over to a wall where there was a map of what we call a TAOR, Tactical Area of Responsibility. And the land to the west of our position had huge red diagonal marks all through it. That was a free fire zone. There wasn't supposed to be anything living over there. And technically, if you saw anything living, you eliminated it because it was all enemy territory.
Right.
So right next door to our base, across the river, we've got a free fire zone. And we had just been 4 clicks into their territory. He says, and he's explaining to me, like I'm a child. He says, the last time a Marine regiment went in there, or a Marine battalion went in there, it took a regiment to get them out. And there were heavy casualties. He says, you clowns are making a beach landing, 4 clicks away.
Right. You were deep behind enemy lines.
I can't believe you're standing here in front of me. By all rights, they should have just decimated you. And I thought, well, thanks for giving us maps.
Yeah, would have been handy. Of course, he probably didn't think that you guys were going to go upriver, so what do you need a map to get across the river for, right?
Well, he told our lieutenant to provide security for the Mike boat, and that's what he did. Told us to be security, and we stayed with the boat.
Yeah, orders are orders, right?
We went.
Yeah. Well, how long were you at Liberty Bridge then?
About 6 months.
Okay.
Almost 6 months.
So was Liberty Bridge sort of like this? Like, is that what it was like the 6 months that you were there?
Well, for 5 months it was a construction project.
Okay. That was the rebuilding of this bridge, right?
Rebuilding the bridge.
And were you providing security then for the rebuilding of the bridge?
Yes.
Is that your right? Okay. Okay. So 5 months, it's not like it's not as hard as maybe it had been in some of the other work that you've done.
Well, occasionally we got loaned out.
Yeah.
Like if there was a battalion operation going on, somebody came in and took the bridge and they sent us out into the field.
Yeah.
And that would last for a week or 10 days and we'd come back.
Okay.
So it was always good to go home and find your gear intact. At least our gear was intact.
Yeah.
But Marines had a thing about not stealing from other Marines.
Right.
Supply, that was another story. We get around somebody's supply base, we're going to get as much gear as we can, as fast as we can.
Absolutely.
And after the Tet Offensive, we had a hard time getting ammunition.
Uh-huh.
The infrastructure didn't provide new ammo.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd go on a patrol, which might include going through swamps and whatever. And in 2 or 3 days we'd get back, and the first thing we did was take all our ammunition apart, empty all our magazines, clean them out, dry them out, and then toothbrush clean every bullet, every round, and put it back into the magazine so it worked the next time.
So you weren't firing into the bushes, like you reserved your ammunition for when you really needed
no, if I didn't have a target, I didn't shoot.
Yeah.
Now, to me, a muzzle flash was a target.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see where that person
Yeah.
is at, then absolutely you're going to shoot back at it.
But we were very, very quiet, and we conserved ammo. And one afternoon, they sent us to a supply base. Well, it was a company with a supply base. And while we were there, I sort of wandered around to the supply hut, which was padlocked, but it had an old key-lock padlock. I was able to pick the lock and looked inside, and sure enough, there were boxes and boxes of fresh ammunition. I needed tracers. My guys needed ball ammo. And I picked up as much as I could, hid it under my jacket, walked off with it. I relocked the door.
Right, so no one knows.
I went and got my guys. We went back, picked the lock. They all carried 3 or 4 boxes of ammo each. Locked it up. And I figured it's a paper error, miscounted something.
Right, right.
Look, it's not like anybody was paying for it.
Right, no harm, no foul. You needed ammunition, and there it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's called being resourceful.
So we were very resourceful.
Yes. Well, you have to be.
And, after the experience of stealing the generator from the Air Force, and, well, it all of a sudden became my duty to become the procuring agent.
Yes.
So whenever the company was short something, they'd let me know about it. And in a few trips to battalion or whatever, they'd have it.
Right, right. Now, to be clear, back home we'd call that stealing, but in the military, we used to call it reallocation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because you're in the military.
We were putting it to the use it was intended.
Absolutely. Yep.
It wasn't doing anything in supply.
Why let them hoard it when you can use it? Absolutely.
And supply worked, the way it worked in supply was, okay, we have everything we're supposed to have on a battalion roster. But if we give anything out, we don't have it. So we have to say we've given it out, get a new one, and then we can give the old one out.
That sounds like good old-fashioned military logic right there.
That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you reported for duty, there would be a bunch of guys leaving. You were always replacing somebody. Well, the guys leaving would make a pile of all their stuff. And whatever you were supposed to have came out of that pile.
Yep.
And if it was short, they would give you something new. But first you had to use up all the used stuff. So my helmet, my flak jacket, everything I had had been worn 2 or 3 times probably before me, because the Marines had been there since '65, and I got there in late '67.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my flak jacket, which should have had a lot of plastic tiles in it, had nothing. It was basically a pad for my shoulder straps.
Oh, geez.
And that was fine with me, because I really didn't want the plastic in there. And I knew it wouldn't stop a bullet.
Right. It just made you feel good to have it on, but it wasn't going to do anything, right?
It didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
It might deflect small shrapnel.
Right. Right.
But anything substantial was going to go right through it anyway.
So you're there providing security for Liberty Bridge. And you're procuring all kinds of stuff that's needed, clearly.
Yeah, I'm becoming a specialist at that.
Yes.
Boots, belts, hats, anything.
Did you manage to find yourself a set of jungle boots that fit?
Oh, yeah.
Good deal. Good deal. So
3 months later.
Right? So 5 months in, I'm assuming they get the bridge done?
Well, they were near getting it done. They actually had heavy planks going from one side to the other, so now you could walk across it. You didn't have to be ferried with little fiberglass boats.
Okay.
And the funny thing about those little boats, One night we heard their motor start up, which was unusual. Usually they didn't do anything except in daylight.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of them. We could hear them coming, and I was on the hillside of the river. So even though there was no light to see it.
Thank you for listening to part 2 of our 5-part series with Don Roach, who served in the United States Marine Corps. Thank you for watching the story of one of our nation's heroes on Veterans Archives, where your story matters. We are dedicated to preserving these stories for future generations.